I got run over by a truck. And so I was in the hospital, I was in a wheelchair. I just couldn't go out and operate. And then on top of it, the housing market started to fall apart. And we were very, very tied into the housing market. Because the housing market was crashing, people are a little tight on money, and you have to do something about it. So do you want to pay $80,000 or $100,000 to completely remodel it? Or would you like to pay $10,000 or $20,000 and get rid of it? Get locked up in a hospital to see what happens to your business? Because it might actually be a really good thing. But if you get 4 people doing 80% of what you can do, suddenly now your growth becomes exponential. When you start to settle for a little bit less than perfection, magic can happen.
Imagine building a successful business only to see its revenues slump hard, seemingly overnight, due to a massive market shift like a housing crash. That was the reality for Ryan, a U.S. Army veteran, serial founder and entrepreneur with deep roots in construction. He was facing a crisis where the hustle he used simply wasn't working anymore. But instead of going under, Ryan did something radical. He pivoted and applied a key strategy that I love. This decision wasn't just about survival, it was about transformation. This strategic change streamlined his processes, reduced costs, increased revenues, and increased profits. It led to him doubling the size of his business year over year over year until he became the largest swimming pool removal contractor in America. Today, Ryan's going to share how he leveraged 2 key strategies from Your Business Growth Playbook to turn a market catastrophe into a systemized, scalable, and highly profitable business. His story is a powerful testament to how strategic focus and decisive action drives change, can help any business owner break through plateaus and get back to growth. Let's tune in as Ryan unpacks his journey from feeling caught in the hustle trap to building a highly efficient, metrics-driven business that thrives by doing less and making more. Ryan, welcome to the show.
Hey, what's up, Jeremy? Good to see you.
So glad you're able to join us. So, Ryan, let's go back in time. Bring us back to before 2007. How did you get into the whole construction space?
I was an ex-military guy. When I got out, I was bartending and I was going to college. And I don't let you stay up late at night, and bars do that to you. So I had to find something else. One day I went out and did some hauling with a friend. And I thought, hey, that's a cool business. There was no way when I ever got junk or any of these other guys out there yet. But I decided I would start my own hauling company just to go out and haul trash. And so I got a trailer to pull behind my pickup truck and went out and went to work, and turned out that grew into a pretty decent sized business. By the time I graduated from college, I think I had about 10 trucks running and a bunch of guys. And yeah, it was good, and kind of grew that over time into a construction company.
So what was the market like at the time? You guys are sort of early in this space, but other companies were doing that. Other guys out there had trucks and all. How did you plan to differentiate at the time?
So back then it was a handful of guys that were all on pickup trucks, very disorganized. They all went to each job and quoted them individually. So it was a really disparate market. There was no organization whatsoever. I have a very organized mind. And to me, I was like, well, I need to have a pricing model. I got to have, I don't want to go to every job twice to bid one time and then come back another time. I need my trucks to look nice. I want guys to wear polo shirts, and I want people to feel comfortable having them at their house. And so I just went through and put all these things together, and it turned out really resonated with the market. And we exploded. We were tripling the size of the business every year.
I love that you looked at the competition and differentiated in a huge way. Just hearing how you show up, how you guys did business, and how you presented to a client is really cool. And that obviously made a difference. So what were some of the earlier wins that came from that? You guys differentiated, you were tripling the size of the business. What did that mean?
I mean, it was fun, but there was no one else doing it the way we were doing it. So I really liked creating business models. And I was, our customers were blown away. They loved us. So we had a huge repeat customer base. I realized really quickly that clean trucks attract a lot more business than dirty trucks. And so really focused on making sure my trucks were all really shiny and, sort of leveraging my people in the right way. And it was just fun. Also I was young. I think I was 25 years old, 24, 25 years old. Man, I had so much energy back then that I wish I could have today, but it was fun. I think that one of the mistakes I made, because that was actually a very repeatable, easy business to run, is I got my ego involved. It was like, I want to do bigger stuff. And so I started doing more of the demolition and buying tractors and roll-offs and dump trucks and 10-wheelers. And eventually my business got really kind of more complicated when what I probably should have done was just double down on the thing that I was really nailing.
Yeah. So it sounds like you went too wide instead of narrowing and niching in.
Yeah, so I really dominated the East Bay, and like to the point where we had all the business. I think the guys at the landfill said 10 of my trucks were coming in for every one of my competitors' trucks. I mean, we were completely dominating. And what I should have done is explore, and I had started to look into it, was like a franchise model, or just, expanding out and growing that same business model that I'd really nailed down. And I just, I wanted to do bigger things, I guess.
So now we get to 2007. You guys have been growing, all is going well. Many of us remember that housing market shift well, but walk us through what that meant for you as, in the contractor space. Like, what did that look like when the housing market turned?
There was so much more into it. So 2007, I don't know if you remember this, Jeremy, but that same year, July 3rd, I had a pretty bad accident that put me in the hospital, and it was, I got run over by a truck. And so I was in the hospital, I was in a wheelchair, I just couldn't go out and operate. And then on top of it, the housing market had started to fall apart. And we were very, very tied into the housing market. Everything we were doing was, we were tearing a house down so someone could build a new one. We were doing construction site cleanup. We were doing all these things that were fueled by a healthy real estate market. When it collapsed, it was like, what do I do? I couldn't physically go out anymore the way that I had before to do it by brute force. And so I just had to get smart. It was the first time I ever sat behind a computer and then said, okay, I gotta hack this. And that was new for me.
Wow. So you're laid up in the hospital. You can't go out to the job sites and write up estimates and close deals and manage the team and all that. And the housing market disappears overnight. I mean, that's not a plateau. That's a different direction. Walk us through what was going on. How did you turn things around?
Yeah, it was a nosedive. First off, I just, talked to my crew and just said, hey guys, we're kind of a bad place right now. I'm not sure how I'm going to do this, but if you guys are willing to, be flexible on your job, maybe you want to drive a Bobcat or a truck, but maybe you'll be cleaning a toilet. As long as you guys are willing to do it, I will keep you all working, and I'll just hustle and I'll find it. And so while I was sitting behind a computer, I thought, okay, well, what can we do? And so I looked at, property preservation at the time, a lot of foreclosures. So I said, let's go fix up some of those houses for banks. That would keep us busy. And so I was able to get quite a few of those accounts. The thing that I did that ended up being really revolutionary was I had an AdWords guy, and I said, here's 50 different projects that we can do. And it was like underground construction, grading, paving, demolition. And one of those things was swimming pool removal. So we built them all out, and then we just watched it. And I was getting a ton for the swimming pool removal. And it was like, well, that's interesting. And I think what was happening was there was, because the housing market was crashing, people were a little tight on money, and they were getting, okay, your pool failed, you have to do something about it. So do you want to pay $80,000 or $100,000 to completely remodel it? Or would you like to pay $10,000 or $20,000 and get rid of it? And so the value proposition for getting rid of it suddenly went hockey stick up. And I happened to be there. And I thought, well, I'm going to run at it. And so I created a bunch of brochures. I hired a geotech soils engineer. I kind of structured the business just to do that. And so that first year, I think we did, 18 pools or something. The next year was like 100. The next year was 200. The next year was 300. And so it just took off like wildfire.
I love that, Ryan. So what I'm hearing is you looked at the data, right? You made an informed decision, not a gut guess. You looked at what the data was showing you, and you niched the business into one space and then differentiated heavily from all the generalists by being a specialist who did it right.
Yep, that's right. And so I started a blog, and that blog got international attention because nobody was a professional at removing swimming pools. Lots of guys installing them. And so I had, people from all over the world inquiring, asking questions about how to remove a pool. And so making myself the authority made people really want to hire me. But the other thing about it was, before I was doing the pool removal, one day we might be doing a demolition project. The next day we're doing an underground construction project. The next day we're taking down a big steel tower. And so every time we do a project, I have to write a big detailed spec plan out, and I got to go with my crew. I have to explain everything to them. I got, so there's like a lot more, I guess there's a lot more like issues that can come up when jobs are really complicated or when they're different every time. With the pool removal, it was day one. Someone goes, disconnects the utilities, put the pump in the pool, get the permit, put it on site. Day two, break holes in the bottom, have the inspection scheduled, they come show up. Day three, and so we had this thing that was just here's what happens and who goes what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So 5 days we got the pool up. We could do 5 of those a week. We had 5 pools a week, all very, very structured. And because of the way that it was just so easy to scale that business, because I didn't have to show up at 5 projects a week. Like, we just had a system, and the system worked very, very well.
When we talk about this concept, we've heard the term before, like, riches and niches, right? Many business owners I talk with who have not really niched down and they're more generalists fear this idea of niching, right? There's concerns of all the business they'll lose by saying no to jobs outside what feels like an arbitrary choice of a core focus. And what they don't realize until they get into that niche space like you did is the efficiencies, is the repeatability, the systemization. And that's so great that you found that you had just this repeatable plan. That's so good.
It was really amazing. And also, just because we were only doing that, all the building inspectors knew us. And so we never got any flack from the building departments. They just knew we did a good job and that we were the pool removal company. And so there was so many benefits, and also much easier to hire people, because when you hire someone, you could train them just to do the single job. And that's like much easier to train them to do a single job than to train them how to do everything. So it was great. It was amazing for me.
That's beautiful. So the specialization lets you have repeatability, which is less of all this one-off work, which can be distracting from like the business growth stuff. And I love that you saw that benefit firsthand. So the opposite side of that is like the crazy days that I think many earlier stage founders think are like necessary, right? That your future life as a business owner is 140-hour work weeks and not all that kind of nonsense. So Ryan, you and I have loved talking about this topic a lot over the years. Hustle. In fact, you wrote an entire book about hustle. And for our listeners, Ryan wrote a book called The Hustle Trap. If you feel trapped by the hustle and the grind, if that's the only way to grow, go out, get a copy of Ryan's book, The Hustle Trap. So I want to dig into that a little more. Like, did you find that hustling more and grinding harder was what your business needed when the market tanked? Was that the only way back?
It's probably the route that I would have gone had I had that choice. But I didn't have the choice because my legs were broken and my shoulder was shattered, and I basically had one good arm. I couldn't operate equipment or drive a truck. So but I didn't before that. I thought I was the most important thing in my business. So one day I was getting, doing a bid. The next day I'm pulling a permit. The next day I'm dropping a tractor off to somewhere. The next day, so I'm working, 10 different jobs, and I'm making myself sort of that key risk to my company, and I didn't realize that until I got hurt and was taken out. And so it was really valuable to me. And also to understand that, like, when I did put it off to my staff after I got hurt, how competent they were. And like, maybe I was just a cog the whole time. Like, I thought that I was really important, but as it turned out, I wasn't that important. And so it was like, I would recommend any of your listeners to go out and get run over by a truck sometime and get locked up in a hospital to see what happens to your business, because it might actually be a really good thing.
Ryan, I'm always so impressed when I talk to founders who buck the trend in this really interesting way, right? Typically, people get into business doing a thing they know how to do, right? They move from being an employee towards like what Robert Kiyosaki and Cash Flow Quadrant, call self-employed, then to business owner, and then eventually to investor, right? But they go out and do the thing they know and then build a business and start supporting and replacing themselves piece by piece, right? Like, that's like the normal path, right? A plumber opens a plumbing company, right? A software developer starts a software company, and so on. But then you get the folks who start a company that does something they have zero skill in, right? Like, I have clients who have their whole company is a software company and they don't know software, but they got a business idea and they hire development teams, right? Or somebody who goes out and starts, an SEO agency, and like, they don't know this stuff, but they hired people who do. And so when you build a business where the core work of the business is not your skill set, you can't fall into that common trap of doing everything because you can, right? And you ended up there in like a much worse way, which I don't recommend for our listeners. Don't get run over by a truck, but like, go through that mental exercise of, if I couldn't do all the things I do every day, what would the business look like? And you did it, right? You were forced into that position of growing a business where you couldn't do everything, and that is a business you can build. That's right. Yeah. And that's sort of, it's funny in the hustle area is there's a lot of people that are pro hustle and there's a lot of people that are anti hustle. And I think I've told you before is I'm agnostic. Hustle, it can be good and hustle can be bad.
In the beginning, when you're getting your business off the ground, you got to hustle. I'm not going to say like, oh, immediately go out and hire all of your team. And then, this is like I think Silicon Valley does it. They raise a bunch of someone else's money, they waste someone else's money to start a company, and that no, do it all yourself. And then as you can afford other people, you start to bring them on. But the problem is it's a trap. Like you go, well, shit, I got myself from $0 to $1 million doing this. So if I do this harder, then I'll take it to 10 million. And it ends up being completely false. It's like, no, that's where that's where the trap comes in. It's like you have to step away from that mindset. So yeah.
And I think even defining hustle though is interesting, right? Like it's the difference, I think, between being busy and being productive, right? Like just because you can be the guy who scrubs the floors, is that a good use of your time to do that? Right? Just because you can be the guy who goes out and writes up, estimates for clients or starts at the job site and all, like, doesn't mean that should be you who's doing it. So like the danger becomes, I think, when you can do something, it doesn't always mean that's where your time is best spent.
And also that, you might be exceptional at what you do, meaning you are 100%. And the person is afraid to hire the person that's 80%. But if you get 4 people doing 80% of what you can do, suddenly now your growth becomes exponential. So people are not willing to give up because they want perfection. When you start to settle for a little bit less than perfection, magic can happen.
It does. It does. I love that. So Ryan, you're a numbers guy. You and I both love looking at the numbers. We've already heard some of your analytical approach to where to niche the business. So when the market shifted, and you found yourself in the hospital and all, you mentioned we weren't talking about a plateau. We were talking about like a nosedive. Like 2-part question. What did it look like revenue-wise, profitability, before you shifted and, started to niche and get back to growth?
Right. Well, we were chugging along probably, I don't know, $1.5 million, $2 million or something beforehand. And then, that dropped off substantially. And actually, when I started the pool removal, I actually did a couple other things too. Is I did the property preservation where we work for banks. Then I also opened some recycling centers. And these were all things that I could, the recycling centers were state funded. So it was like the state still had money, even if the real estate market didn't. And so that was a nice one as well. And so the 3 different prongs, it's like the money from the one company drained out, but I started to build up money from the other sides to come back in. And like I said, the first year of removing the pools, they took out like 18 pools. So that didn't make a dent on anything at all. And so there was a transfer from, what the stuff we were doing dropped off, and then the pools kind of picked up. And so it took probably a couple of years before it really started to go. But profitability wise, the pool removals themselves were, 60, 70% margin work, and construction is generally 35% margin. And so it was so good. And that was because we were doing it at scale. And so we had, I was controlling the dirt, the dirt, it was, we made sure that I had a person in the office who was calling around all the truckers and excavators and said, hey, you got dirt, call us, we'll find a place for it. Usually it was for our sites, but it was anywhere besides our competitor sites. And so once you had a sort of a grip hold on the dirt, then we could own it. And that's actually where my other company, Dirt Match, came from that I run now.
I love how often us entrepreneurs have one business and then there's a need we have in that business or a gap in the marketplace. And so we start a company to solve our own problem that ends up like eclipsing the business we had before. And that little side hustle idea becomes the bigger business. And like that happens to you again and again. And that's really cool.
Yeah, it's awesome.
So Ryan, had you not ended up niching, right, and going on this pool removal route and just kept on keeping on, what would have happened?
It's hard to say. The area that I was a C21 and a Class A, so I was demolition general engineering contractor. A lot of the businesses that were above me were like multi-generation, good old boys club, like very hard to break into. And I didn't have because I hadn't worked in the industry before, I just kind of figured it out as I went. It was going to be very, very difficult for me to grow the business to the next level, meaning getting into the big, the larger contracts, working for government, to that next level of growth. I just didn't know how. And so I don't know what would have happened. It's really hard for me to say. I probably would have coasted along where I was for a very long time while I was trying to figure it out. Maybe 20 years down the line, I would have. But instead, 7 years after the accident and everything, I sold my company and made some good money.
Nice. I love that. You niched and had a company that was valuable, whereas I imagine most construction and contracting companies never exit.
No, as a matter of fact, I called around to some brokers when I was telling them I wanted to sell, and all of them said, nah, you can just sell for the cost of your equipment. So I'm like, well, if that's the case, I'll just take my equipment to the auction and not take the liability of selling the company. So I sold it myself, and I had a lot of interest. So
that's so great. When we talk about exit strategies, having differentiation like you did is so huge. If you're just another, name your industry, that's not that exciting, right? There's sort of no multiples, but when you differentiate, that's huge. All right. So in the book, Ryan, as you know, we talk about these different, the three levers in my formula, my FAQs to profit, right? And your niching into pool removal really impacted two of those beautifully. I love that you even know your numbers, right? That, the typical profit margin is like 35% and you guys were at 60, 70, right? You were charging a premium price because of your specialization, and you were seeing a much higher inflow of new customers. You were getting more customers in the front because of that specialization. So that's huge. But I want to look at the other side of that. And this is where I think so many companies go, which is discounting, right? Trying to be the lowest price. You guys niched and had premium price. Tell us more about that journey. Did you consider discounting? Did you go premium right away? Like, how'd you figure out your pricing model?
So the pricing was whatever I wanted to charge, meaning I would walk in, I would just see based off of access and the size of the pool, I kind of know immediately. But I made, I wanted to look like, okay, so basically I had my first iPad application I built in 2008. And I would go in there and I would type a bunch of stuff in there, all the dimensions, everything. And then I would send it, and then we would send up a bid, work it up and send it in the afternoon. But the way that I would do it is I would say, okay, later on today, you're going to get a bid from me. I'll go home in the evening and I'll put it all together and make sure I get you competitive pricing. But really, I just sent it to someone overseas and they would just send it. So it was like once I left the property, I didn't want to deal with it anymore. When you get the bid, you're going to get 100 of my last pools that we've taken out. I encourage you to call as many of them as you'd like. At least 3 of them, just to understand the quality of service you get. I also would encourage you to get 3 bids. When you do, I probably won't be the cheapest. I won't be the most expensive, but I'll be the best. We don't negotiate our price. And so I hope you hire us. But if not, then I wish you best of luck. Use me as a resource. And I would never follow up with them. And I landed like 95% of the jobs.
Wow. Okay. So what I'm hearing, Ryan, is, first of all, you systematize this, right? Not just in terms of the quoting. So it was an easy process that someone overseas could just work this through. By having the system in place, you also had a sales system for scripted. I mean, you still remember that. You still remember this like it was yesterday, right? Of what you said the same way every single time, whether it was you or someone else quoting it. Third is you had this niche experience. So you had the huge reference list for your prospects. And fourth, you weren't pushing for the sale. And you weren't looking to negotiate it. You were able to walk away from that confidently, and it worked almost every time.
It's very effective.
That's gold right there. That's beautiful. All right. So it sounds like you weren't top of the market pricing, but you chose to be at that upper end.
So I was consistent pricing. So meaning like a lot of the other contractors charge based on how busy they are. And I've always been a believer. The hauling company was the same way, is that if I'm not able to scale, that's not my customer's problem. That's my problem. So I'm going to charge a fair price every time. And so it actually, with the hauling company, ended up really well because during the busy season, all my competitors would charge astronomical prices. And during the slow season, they were doing it for almost break even. Well, what would happen is because people called around for pricing, they would remember that I was the cheapest during the summertime, and they would call me year round. And so I'd have my price would be steady all year round, and they would go chasing after numbers. And so when I say I'm not going to be cheapest, I'm not going to be the most expensive, is because the most expensive guy is the really busy guy, and the least expensive guy is desperate for work. And so I'm neither of those. If I need to take out more pools, it's my responsibility as a business owner to scale, to handle the business, So
yeah, I love it. So, okay. Before pools, every job was different, right? And you were quoting, or typically companies are quoting like, the seasonal contractors, right? But you're able to systematize this. So for our listeners who are like, hey, like, how do I systematize, this stuff in my business, right? Like, what are some practical steps that you took or others can take to niche and create a repeatable template that they or anyone can use in the business?
Good question. I think this is the way my mind thinks. Like I love systems. I have systems around everything. It drives my wife crazy. But that's just how I think it's because I'm a little bit ADHD and like I have a hard time focusing on things. And so if I don't have built systems around things, everything goes to shit. So, but I'm really big on, when I hire people, I put people in exceptional systems, meaning I don't ever hire an A person and put them in a C system. I'd rather have an A system and a C person. Meaning, so once you have those things really, really tight, so that's why I like to do almost every job by myself first. I do the job, I understand the job, I understand where things go awry. I build guardrails and systems, and then I put people into those systems, and then it works well. And that's been really effective for me across all my businesses.
That's smart. I always like to tell folks when we're talking about systems that like create a system, right? It's not gonna be perfect. That's okay. Like it can go one of three directions, right? The ideal happy path is you create a system, someone uses it, and they get the result that you got before, the result that you want. Like that's our ideal. The reality is the first time out the gate, you're going to find that you've got someone running the system that gets not the result you want. And that comes down to one of two things. Earlier on, usually because the system wasn't clear, you forgot a step, something that you thought was obvious, they didn't know, and so you revised the system. It's a living, breathing document. Down the road, when you got an A+ system, but you might have a C player using the system, if they don't get the result, they probably just weren't using the system. Then that's a coaching training moment. So I love that. A systems and C folks versus C systems and A folks.
Well, I mean, I'd rather have both, do it both A. I want A people and I want A systems. But the distinction between what you said and what I said is the guardrails for me, I build bulletproof systems that are very well defined. For staff, I build systems that have guardrails. Like I want them to use creativity and I want them to feel like they have flexibility as long as they're working within those guardrails.
Ryan, I think that might be a good title for your next book right there. Bulletproof systems. That's pretty good.
Yeah.
That's really good. All right. So as you're implementing this niching and, dialing into one space, right? Really well. What were some like bigger challenges you faced during that? I imagine it didn't all just go smoothly once you said, hey guys, we're doing swimming pools now. Like, what was that like?
There was some learning curve for sure. There was a lot of moving parts in a pool removal. You have the building inspector needs to do his inspections. There's lots of different pieces of equipment that can get moved in and out. There's getting the right dirt and then getting samples of the dirt to give to the soils engineer to get the curve sample, and then having an engineer on site that's testing the compaction. And then, so if any one of those things breaks, everything breaks. Truck doesn't show up, Bobcat breaks down, engineer doesn't show up, the whole thing breaks down. And so I had to be very, very systematized about everything that I did and make sure to minimize those and have backup plans for if things break, what are you going to do? Like if a Bobcat broke down, like I'm not trying to troubleshoot, I'm getting another Bobcat. So buying extra equipment and if having an engineer on standby, a second one, like making sure that those were taken care of was really important. But other gotchas, I don't know. I found it to be, once the system was in place, it was just really easy. It was just about going and shoving more people at top of funnel, and then it just fell out the bottom as profit.
So good. So, you and I are both numbers guys, right? We can talk about the top line numbers all we want of increasing gross revenues and then increasing that profitability. But we don't always get to more profitability just by increasing pricing, right? And niching and specialization. Another area I think you've got some genius, and you've shared this with me over the years, is looking at the other end of the formula, the expense side. So you've got some really good thoughts, and I think life strategies around this that most folks don't usually talk about. What do you do to keep your expenses low, and how have you gone about that? How have you seen that help out profitability?
I'm a lean operator, and I don't use hardly any leverage. And to be honest, had I leveraged a little bit more, I may have done a lot better, but I feel very secure in the way that, meaning like when I buy trucks, I was buying it for cash. When I buy a tractor, I'm buying it for cash. Everything I was doing was always keeping my monthly expenses very low, because you got to remember, I started my first company in 2000. So I went through 2001 crash, went through the 2000, 2007, 8 crash, so it's there's scar tissue there. And as a result, I want comfort. Next time there's a crash, I just want to be I guess we'll go on vacation for a while, because it's just too stressful for me. And so that has affected the way, even the money that I make now, I take 50% of it. I save 50% of everything I make. I'm very careful. I never lay people off. If we have a down year or whatever, I just find something for my people to do, because we've still been, we've done well for past years. And so I know that bigger companies like to, lay people off or use leverage and make a, ton of money. And that game for me is just too stressful. I don't want it.
Even in your, in your personal life, you and I have talked about, whether it's cars, motorcycles, houses, whatever it is, it's like even outside the businesses, it's cash. It's done. It's not leverage. You don't have to worry about that, that not every month. It's already taken care of.
I never finance depreciable assets. So I always buy all my cars and everything is all cash. When I bought like my house, I put 60% down when I bought a house and then I remodeled it with cash. So I like very low monthly expenses.
You sleep a little easier at night that way too. Yeah. Cool. All right. So beyond doubling year over year, you guys quickly became the largest pool removal contractor in America. Which is great. Ended up moving that towards an exit. How did you find this, high margin nature of the niche was helping your bottom line? We've talked about the expenses. We've talked about charging premium pricing. You saw some great growth. What was that journey like getting towards and through that exit?
I love high margin businesses because I can service the client, and low margin businesses, you're always worried about nickel and diming. And so for me, it was all about just taking care of my people, my staff, taking care of my customer. I even had I guess I call it like a slush fund where, the average pool was, take $10,000. And they said, well, why don't we just, for every pool, we'll just take $300 and put it into a slush fund. And so that way, if a customer asks for something, we don't have to do change orders or fight them on it. We're just going to use the slush fund. As long as we stay within there of that, 3%, we're good. And turned out we would only have one out of every 20 customers that would be like, hey, I want you to build me a new fence, where it clearly wasn't in the scope, but it's like, no, we got $8,000 in the slush fund. That'll cost a couple $1,000. Yeah, that's fine. And so it just allowed me to service my customers better. But then also, taking a lot of that money, putting it back into the business, and then obviously selling a business on multiple. It's nice to have healthy margins.
Ryan, I love what you've done with the premium pricing. So often we talk about, when you charge a premium price, that allows you to spend more to acquire a customer. But what I'm hearing you say is, not only can you spend more to acquire a customer, you can spend more to take care of your customers. And that's beautiful. So nicely done on that.
Which does exactly what you were saying in the first place. By taking care of your customer, you build raving fans. Raving fans get you more business. And so, you see a lot of these people do it where they spend all their money on marketing to drive in business. They bring in a person and then they don't treat them that well. And then they have to spend a bunch of money to find the next customer and a bunch of money to find the next customer. I just want to spend money to find a customer once and then just love on those customers and let them refer me to all friends. It's so much cheaper.
Yeah. Beautiful. All right. So we're both KPI guys, right? We love our metrics. There's a phrase you talk about often, which is, managing by metrics. Tell us, what are the KPIs you look at? What numbers matter to you in your businesses? How do you know your businesses are on track or not?
I mean, for the most part, it's cash flow. And this is because I've never raised any money. My businesses they're there to make money. And luckily, by taking care of your people and taking care of your customers, that's how you grow a good, hardy, durable business. But I watch cash flow. I've got my margins pretty tight, and so I can look at top line and understand how much is going to shake out in the bottom. But I know my numbers. I know what it costs me to acquire a customer. I know, our review ratings. I know I've got it pretty dialed in.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's funny because the Silicon Valley way is you look at burn rate, right? The assumption is the business is running negative, right? The question is how long that runway is, right? Or you contrast that with the business owners that don't look at the business as a cash flow producing asset, but look at it as the thing they do every day without any thought of it being a cash flow producing asset versus a job.
Well, there's a lot of people that run around calling themselves entrepreneur, but they've never actually made a profit. They just raised a bunch of money. And so if somebody comes to me and tells me they raised $5 million for the last startup, I say, well, how much money you got back to your investors? Well, nothing. We folded. I'm like, well, you should be embarrassed about that. You should keep it to yourself. Entrepreneurship is about taking resources, aggregating together, where the output of the aggregation exceeds the input. That's what profitability is. And so if you're not doing that, then you're not yet an entrepreneur. You're just, you're a wishful entrepreneur.
Or the folks who call themselves a business owner when really they're self-employed.
Yeah, right. Which nothing wrong with that.
No, there's just, know where it is or know where on the journey you are. All right. So Ryan, for fellow business owners who are out there and they're feeling a plateau or a slump, or hopefully didn't get hit by a truck, but seeing a change in the marketplace, right? And they're feeling that plateau, based on your experience, pivoting, niching, focus on expense reduction, et cetera. Like, what's some advice you'd give to someone feeling stuck?
Yeah, I mean, I like to give myself space when I feel stuck. Matter of fact, I've felt maybe a little stuck personally, professionally lately. And so this weekend, I'm going on a 15 or 20 mile backpacking trip by myself, clear my head, get just do thinking, bring a couple of books, whatever. That's usually the best place for me. Surround yourself with other people. I've got a lot of really smart entrepreneurs that I surround myself with, and they're always, great motivation for me. We go on a hike together. We can talk things through. I guess if you feel in a rut, a lot of people feel like, well, I'm in a rut. I need to double down in my business. And so they run at it even harder, and that might get them further away from the real answer. And so, if it's possible, step away from your life day to day, let your creativity take over. If you don't create space to be creative, then you're not going to find the new solution. So
yeah, creativity is not something you can, put 15 minutes on the calendar and say, hey, that's my creative time. I got to get it done.
Well, and also people tend to want to, like you were talking about before, you want to stay busy, being hustling and being busy. And that's the enemy of creativity.
Well, it's like the real difference there between working in your business versus working on it, or, to what you're talking about is giving yourself space from it. I know every time I've taken space from the business, whether it's because, we're welcoming a new kiddo into the family, or, just travel or whatnot, I come back like not just refreshed, but like energized, and I've had ideas and I can't wait to just get going. Like it's so good to get that intentional space from the business.
Totally.
So I love that. Well, I hope you have a phenomenal backpacking trip. I look forward to the photos and hearing about what ideas and all came from that. So good job getting this space. And for our listeners, make sure you give yourself space, whether it's a week, off, or just a weekend away from email and everything else. That space is huge. So, Ryan, to recap, what I'm hearing is, you found growth, but the market shifted on you, and doing more of the same wasn't helping. You got stuck, and had you not changed, you'd have ended up, that general contractor doing the same thing, living in his pickup truck and only seeing an exit as selling the equipment, just working longer hours for less money. And the key that you found to getting unstuck was niching and then streamlining, which brought in not just more customers, but it also increased your gross sales and your profit. That's fantastic. Ryan, thanks so much for joining us. And for our listeners who want to connect with you or find out more about what you're working on, or pick up a copy of your book, The Hustle Trap, where do you want them to go?
Sure. Yeah. You can check out ryancrownholm.com or at Ryan Crownholm on pretty much every platform. There's only one of me. My book is on Audible and on Amazon for The Hustle Trap if you want to check it out. But that's it.
I love it. Ryan, thank you for joining us. And thanks, folks, for tuning in today. I love what you're doing. Wishing you safe travels, and have a really great trip, and keep us posted on what's next.
Awesome. Thanks, Jeremy.
Thanks, Ryan.